Hello, everyone. This is Mark Taylor on helping leaders achieve what matters. I have with me today Christine Courtney. Now, Christine is the president of the leadership program. She's been there for almost 20 years. She's also been a Vistage member for almost 20 years. She's a graduate of the Stanford University executive program that she did in conjunction with Vistage International. And she has her own podcast called Stepping into Leadership, which I listen to religiously. So please welcome Christine Courtney.
Thank you, Mark. It's true. I am a leadership junkie. I can't help myself. And I love Vistage and I love you. So I'm so happy to be here. So thank you.
You're also a Vistage speaker, and you've spoken now to two or three of my groups, and they were just amazed. It was like one of the best sessions that they said that they ever had.
Oh,
So
thank you.
I've had the opportunity to experience your workshops, and what I really liked about them was how actionable they are.
Mm.
I mean, one of them, you come up with 20 actionable ideas that people can use to implement right away, like the very next day. So if you were going to share, like, what one do you think is the most critical one for effective leadership?
Good question. I think the reason that I give 20 is because it really depends on what you need in your organization. I think from being in Vistage for so long and hearing so many really valuable speakers, and I'm always the person in the group that immediately wants to implement something. And so when I started to put together what would I want to share as a Vistage speaker, it was like I would want to give those folks like me 20 options of things that they could do, from very simple to some that are take a little bit more time and thinking. I think one example that is so popular with so many people is what we call the employee instruction manual. And so it's this idea of, when my dryer all of a sudden gives me a code on my washing machine and my dryer tends to go on the fritz, and it'll say like the code will flash, 5C, 5C, 5C. And I have no idea what to do. I kind of like break down, and then I go to look for my dog-eared, user manual. My kids and young people now that I work with say, no, you go to YouTube and you find out what that means, but or chat GPT, right? But anyway, regardless, I can go and I go, oh, 5C, that's what this means. That's what I have to do, clean out the filter, whatever it is. And what I love about the employee instruction manual, it's a user manual for your employees. And so basically it starts off with, it could be anywhere from 5 to 10 questions, from things like, what's your relationship to deadlines? In other words, do you like to do things last minute? Do you like a lot of lead time? Do you like a mixture? When you're stressed out, what does it look like? When you're, how do you want support? What does support look like to you? We ask, because we're a leadership organization, we ask who your leadership idols are, because that gives us some instincts, some inputs into who they are. Sometimes we ask, well, how do you like your coffee? Like, it can be anything that's on there. And then what happens is that, how do you like your communication? Do you prefer it by email, by text, by just coming up and talking to you, by picking up the phone? And if you ask these questions ahead of time and you say to people like, listen, we're going to try this activity that I learned at Vistage. We're going to try doing this ahead of time. And you say, everyone's going to get a copy on our team. And, we did ours in the old days, by paper, and we'd give everybody like a little stapled book of everyone for their desk. Nowadays, people have it on their phones or have it on, their teams or whatever it is online. But either way, what's great about it is when something's not going right, when everything's going fine, you don't need any of this stuff. But it generally doesn't go fine all the time. And so sometimes, for instance, for myself, I've had issues sometimes with people, and I've worked with people for, many times 20 years now or so, but we can run into rough patches and we're not getting along. And when I've gone back and looked at their employee instruction manual and go, oh, I am communicating with them in all the ways they don't like to be communicated with right now. So maybe if I shift that, like, it's a strategy. If I shift, instead of just calling her up whenever I have something that I'm frustrated with or I want to discuss or I want her to do, maybe since it says she prefers to have her information done first in email so she can understand, that I'll meet her where she's at and I'll write her an email of everything that I'm thinking about before we have the conversation. And I've just seen a lot of shifts that way. Another one was, it says on ours, how you like to be recognized. And we do, awards like everybody else does it at our all hands staff meeting. We have what we call hardcore awards, which are based on our core values. And if you see someone really living it. And so there is a woman in our office who gets one every time. Like, she's so valuable. And everybody wants to acknowledge how hard she works and what she does to live our values and make our company so great. But the problem is that she came up to me and she said, Christine, I really appreciate getting these awards, but it's really difficult for me to have these publicly. Do you think that there's any way you could just put a little note on my desk next time? And I thought, oh my God, we have been making her life horrible month after month after month out of completely good-natured love that we want to show her. And so once I opened that up to my staff and I said, oh, we're going to still give her these things, we're just going to do it in a way that she likes. So that's one that people tend to really like and can grab onto at whatever level of the organization you're in.
I love that. And now I'm imagining if you could put that into your chat GPT, you could just ask ChatGPT, how do I deal with Christine? How do I recognize Christine? So you don't have to look it up. It'll tell you all about Christine.
Oh my God, I love it. I need to learn how to do that. I don't think I use ChatGPT yet at that level. Mark, you're such a teacher. I'm writing it down. ChatGPT. Okay, I got it. I'm putting myself in. I'm giving it to my husband.
It's true. You could write instruction manuals for yourself and your husband to see how you two can communicate. Put in the 5 love languages, all those kinds
Oh,
of things.
that's good. Okay, I like it.
I just read an article on chatbots, and I know that that's really becoming popular. Is that you can train it in how you think and how you would respond and how you would write emails, so that you could use it more and more to get your voice, so that you don't have to edit it as much.
That's brilliant, isn't it? My
Yeah.
God, I love
Yeah.
it.
For the past 30 days, I've been interviewing candidates for our new leadership program that we have coming up in December. And I've been asking them what is their biggest challenges as managers. And most of these are people that are very technically proficient. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, I have 2 people that are partners at a law firm, but they don't teach management and leadership at law school. And every single one of these, they haven't learned management and leadership. The biggest issues that I hear coming up with them is delegation.
Mm.
They got very good at doing something themselves, and then to try and delegate takes more time. They don't do it right. They make a lot of mistakes, and they complain that they don't have any time, yet they don't really trust the people that they could potentially delegate to. What would be some effective, actionable ideas that you would suggest on really how to delegate?
I love it because you're exactly right. Everybody wants to delegate, and yet it's probably the biggest frustration point, because what we hear from the managers is like, oh, it's just easier for me to do it myself, or I might as well do it myself because it's not going to be done right, or it takes too long to explain, or all this stuff. And then when I talk to the people who get delegated to, they're like, why'd they even give it to me? They don't trust me. I have no idea what they're talking about. They were unclear from the get-go. So then they come in and then they micromanage the process. Like, just forget it. So it's this thing that could be really good, because the whole point of delegate is you're going to try to elevate them, right? And if I can get rid of some of my work, that allows me to elevate the work that I'm supposed to be doing or could be doing. And so one of the things, these tips we talk about in the workshop all the time, but the first one is probably the hardest, is to briefly state what it is you want delegated in one sentence. And what I find is that people do not prepare for a conversation about delegation. They've got to a point where they're frustrated with whatever the work is, and they just say, okay, it's time for you to do it. And then they spill out paragraphs of their whole history of doing this work and so forth. And the person kind of gets lost in the sauce and they don't know, wait a minute, what exactly, like, where is their clarity? And so by practicing writing out beforehand, can I get this down to 2 sentences, 1 sentence? So at the end of the whole thing of this particular tip, it's going to be 5 sentences, but the first sentence will be what it is you're delegating. So for instance, I work with a project management firm, and one of the people that I coach recently had this come up. So they were told, okay, let's say it's Jane. Jane, I want you to start taking over the client project meetings each week. Okay. Now I know Jane knows I'm going to take over this. All sorts of emotions or whatever come into mind. The second sentence is the why. So this is why you, why you, why this. So Jane, I think these project management meetings are important to keeping us on track. And you are going to do this because you are super organized and you've already shown ways here where you keep us on track. And now you're going to help us keep the client on track. So now this person is not looking at this like, this is terrible, I'm getting your work that you just don't want to do anymore. They're looking at like, wow, I am seen. You value me in some way, and this is important. So now I'm going to have impact in a way that maybe I didn't. So if you put that extra time of, and the younger your people are, the more important this is. Like some of our older generations, myself included, we're just told this is what you're going to do, and this is a career opportunity, I'm going to do it. Or you think, well, I've been told, that's why I'm going to do it. That is not the way of the world anymore, right? So you have to think like, why them? Why is who they are important to this, and why is this important? Then the third thing is that then you get to say the constraints of the project. So this is what I know about this client. They're difficult, they're going to ramble, they need some structure, they need you to watch the timing. Okay, got it. And you only have an hour for this meeting. Okay, so you've got the constraints out. Fourth, and there's only 2 more steps left. Fourth, these are where they generally get those first 3 maybe, but these next 2 are difficult. 4 is you're going to explain how and when we're going to report on this progress. And if you set this up from the beginning, Mark, what I find is you have a lot less problems later on, right? It's all in the preparation. So if you say, since you're new at this, Jane, I would like you to send me your agenda for the meeting 2 days before the meeting so I can give you notes so that you can be as successful as possible, especially in the beginning as you do this. And then afterwards, we'll tag on 5 minutes for me to just give you feedback on what went well, what we could improve for next time. So now you have just set up your feedback meeting in a way that is not stressful. It's not like you have to say after the meeting, Jane, can you hold on a second? I want to give you some feedback. And then panic, strikes Jane. And she's like, why did I even take on this stupid thing? Whereas if you know ahead of time, like, oh, great, she's going to help me nudge me along or figure out what can go right or wrong. And then finally, the one that no one ever does, it's the cringe-worthy moment that people worry about, is the one of rephrase it. Can you rephrase back to me what you just heard? Now, if you say it that way, then people hate it. If you say it like, listen, Jane, I just want to be sure that I've been clear. So can you say back to me what you heard, so that way I can make adjustments in my language or in my sense of being clear with you on these. And then everybody relaxes. Then it's not about them, not picking up on it. Like, what do you think? I'm stupid? Of course I heard what you said, but it's more about me checking myself for clarity. And I find if you just do those 5 things, and it's okay to have them listed, like to say, we're going to go through these 5 things, even if it's a very small delegation. And when you're starting with someone, start with something small so that you can have a practice with them of doing this before you throw them the whole project out of frustration. So that's my tip on.
Oh, that was great. So, what it is that you're going to delegate, why you're delegating it. What was number 3?
Constraints of the project. So, things that that maybe from your history of working with this, or what's, maybe it's a budget number, whatever it is.
Got it. And then number four was a check-in, and I'm going to check in
Report on, yeah.
often. And the last one was, well, not say, can you rephrase that to me? But I just want to get crystal clear. But basically, you want to
It's a
hear,
rephrase.
yeah, hear what they said so that you can see that they're crystal clear. I love that. That's simple. That's easy to do.
Mhm.
You know, how often should you check? Because, I hear people say, I don't want to be a micromanager,
Mm.
but I often tell them that, if you're training somebody to do something that they haven't done before, you have to check in frequently to see how they're doing in order to, if you're worried that they're not going to do it right, then you need to check in until you see that they're doing it right. And the more that they do it right, the more you can let go of it.
Yeah. I think that's, it's everyone's biggest fear. It's so funny to be a micromanager. And we use that term without for a lot of things. I think that it's all how you set it up. If you don't set up anything, then you ultimately become your biggest fear. You become a micromanager because you've not set up any parameters. But um, I think the how often, to your question, how often do you check in, depends on the person and depends on what you're delegating. So that is also could be collaborative. So you could talk about it beforehand, but what I suggest for people, and when I've seen it work best even for myself, is to say, listen, we need to figure out how we're going to report on progress here, because I don't want to just dump something on you and then come in at the last minute in a panic or something because I haven't been supportive. So what do you think is realistic for us to check in beforehand and then check in after? Or can we check in, what is more comfortable for you so that you feel like you can get support? I always think of it like, if you in the gym, if you are weightlifting, a bar, and you have a spotter there with just two fingers under that, from each hand under that bar. And so you've given them something, but your fingers in the beginning are there to help them in case they need you, but you are not lifting that bar. If you're lifting that bar for them, you are micromanaging. They're not gaining any strength because you're just doing it, right? But if they know you're there, and if things start to slip, you can put those two fingers there to just be like, I'm here, you're okay. Then they're going to start to gain strength, and then you can kind of back off until it's time to put more weight on again, and then you do it again. And then so the whole point is as they get stronger, you're adding. But I find that the best thing is to be a little bit collaborative and say, okay, let's try this. Let's try reporting on this way. You come to me, once a week, or you come to me twice a week and give me, or if it's daily updates, depends on this thing, but make sure they are on board with that, and that it's not too cumbersome, but they see it as the whole point is supporting them, not your fears of them not being able to do a good job.
Love that. Love the metaphor too of the spotter.
Yeah.
So one of the things that they often ask me is, well, what do I do if I told them to do something? They said that was going to be done by Wednesday, and now it's Thursday, and they didn't do it.
Yeah. What's funny is that most of the time when you ask a few follow-up questions, they they just have been stewing with it and not actually talking to the person about it. Um, and then decide to take it back. And in our minds, we've created a whole story about why this person doesn't respect me, or has a bad attitude, or isn't hardworking. And we've created all these assumptions and stories before we've even just gone up and talked to them about it. And so what I try to remind myself, because it's difficult to confront somebody who hasn't done something, right? And oftentimes when we're new managers, especially, we were just doing the work ourselves not that long ago. We were really good. That's why we got promoted. So we're surprised when someone isn't as good as us, um, or doesn't work in the same ways that we did, because maybe they're more new at that. And I've been doing that job for a while. It's like going from a player to a coach, is what we often say. But basically, I think if the person hasn't done it or they haven't come in to report on it, if Jane hasn't, then I have to say, hey, Jane, remember we talked that you were going to get me the agenda by Wednesday. It's now Friday morning. The meeting starts in an hour, and I still don't have your agenda. And what worries me is that I'm here to support you being as good as possible at this as you can, and you having a feeling of success, but also me feeling a little bit comfortable that our client, who's so important to our organization, is taken care of. And it's really hard for me to give feedback at this point when we only have an hour before this meeting. And I don't want to take it back from you. I want you to be able to do it. And usually they'll say, oh, I'm so sorry. It's just that I have all these other priorities, or I've got too much on my plate. And then you can say, okay, well, that's a great thing for us to talk about. Let's look at your priorities separately. But if you can't make this deadline, you have to let me know beforehand. And then they're like, okay. And then you better make a meeting to talk about priorities, because there's a bigger issue at hand, you know.
Yes.
Sometimes you get people. I had somebody yesterday who said to me, well, they don't even tell me anything. They just say, sorry. Okay. And then you're really, and most managers go, oh, okay, I guess I told them, and then walk away. But you kind of have to stick in the uncomfortableness for a while, and maybe ask a couple of more questions, even though short-term pain, long-term gain. That's why the mantra I try to tell myself, like, I'm going to sit in this uncomfortable space of holding somebody accountable, because the long term it's going to be better.
That's what I tell myself when I'm working out. Short-term pain. Oh, I hate this. I hate this. But long-term gain.
Exactly.
Another challenge that I'm hearing as I'm doing these interviews is accountability. The dreaded performance review. How do I hold people accountable? Do you have any tips related to accountability?
Wow. Well, I think that most of the time, accountability, I mean, when it comes to people, there's a lot of things that I know nowadays when we talk about accountability with so many folks, they're using tools like online tools to help with that. So there are things that people can use, like Asana or Slack or Teams, things that Trello, that you can track projects and see how people are doing, and then they can see whether they're being accountable to the whole group. And so that is, I'm noticing, especially with a lot of young people, that those things are really valuable. I think, though, on a bigger level, for when you're talking about managing people, besides the tools, the technology that can help us, I think it's really about having real conversations with people and being willing to do that work. And so one of the times when you dig in a lot of, oftentimes around accountability, I find that people are not having regular one-on-ones with their staff. And if you have regular, repeated, weekly, scheduled, even if it's just a half an hour every week with your staff, those accountability questions kind of lighten up a bit, because you're looking at stuff every week. So it's not like you're waiting for a project to finish, or you have a shorter time frame, and you can kind of steer them, and you can kind of know if something's going off track in a way that doesn't have to be a big, difficult conversation, but like a kind of a gentle steering, or holding. And so I find that usually when people are worried about accountability, they're not having regular scheduled one-on-ones with their staff. And they'll say to me, they'll push back and say, I can't possibly, I have too many people, or I don't have enough time, I can't add more meetings to my schedule. And I'm like, well, when we dig in, trust me on this, most people, and I talk to a lot of busy people, if they do it, it changes their life. Because now, instead of having that person bothering them throughout the entire week with every question and interrupting them, and there's some statistic about how long it takes you to get back on track once you've been interrupted, right? Something crazy, like 17 minutes per interruption or something. But what I find is that a lot of times they'll still call you if there's a crisis. You want them to do that. But more often than not, they'll know, like, oh, I can wait and talk to her about this then, or I can, And the same thing with you, so that really that weekly one-on-one is actually probably saving you time. It's also saving you some crises because you're able to check in with them on how they're doing, and they're going to probably bring up problems that are happening a lot sooner than they would. So I find accountability, one is find some technology that helps people. You don't have to remember all this stuff the old way with a million to-do lists. There's some technology that can help, but also it's really having the conversations ahead of time in these one-on-ones. And then when they're not being held accountable, you have to have a more difficult conversation where you say, hey, listen, you said you were going to do this by then. It didn't happen. What's going on? You all right? Like, and be curious. Like sometimes there is a problem. I mean, recently at work, we had somebody who wasn't making some deadlines, and they're generally a good employee. But when I had a whole story in my head of what was happening, oh, they're going downhill, they're doing this. And then when you actually talk to them, and because, you know, I'm now at a point where I make less mistakes than I used to. Before I would have just come in with like, what's happening? Why aren't you doing this? Now I'm like, what's going on? Are you okay? Like, it's just a different way of coming across. And then you find out like, oh, her daughter's getting bullied in school. She's new to middle school, and she has to go and pick her up at 3 o'clock every day so that she makes sure that she's safe. And then you think, oh, okay, well, this is what's happening, and how can I be supportive and listen to her? And then she also gets an understanding of like, these things are important that you're dropping. And it kind of just, she knows that she has my support, but she still has to get those things done. It's not like those things go away, but it also allows me to relax a little bit and not create this whole story in my head and, go into a panic mode that makes things worse.
It's interesting the stories we create in our heads. One of my worst embarrassing mistakes that I made is somebody hadn't done something that I asked them 3 times to do. And so I'm thinking they're lazy, they're
Mm.
rebellious, they're going to quit. I mean, you make up all these kind of stories, and of course, I very ungracefully confronted him and I said, look, I've asked you this for 3 times, what's going on here? Are you going to do it or not? And then he said, my father's in the hospital and he's going to die. And then I, oh,
Oh,
God, I felt like
oh,
such a,
I feel it. I feel it, Mark. That's a hard one. And we've all probably made those mistakes too. And
uh,
sometimes, Brene Brown has this way of starting, which I love, where she'll say, um, in Dare to Lead, where she says one of the good ways to start is like, the story in my head right now is this. So even with that person, if you're able to say, look, the story in my head right now is that you don't respect me, or maybe you don't care about this job anymore, and you might even be leaving. Like, that's the story in my head, and I just want to check it with you because I know that it could be off. And then the person goes, oh my god, no,
uh,
this is what's happening, and inevitably it's a different story, right? But it's
yes.
kind of interesting to be that honest. When I saw her say that, I went, oh, that's interesting. Can I be that honest with what's happening in my head? And when I've tried it a few times with people that I trust and have worked with for a while, it's amazing how it opens up that relationship and the honesty and the trust in it.
Yeah. No, I like that. I like what you said first, even better, though, just to go up and say, hey, I was just wondering what was going on,
Yeah,
more like with a curiosity versus this blame and shame finger pointing
so true.
and
Yeah.
I not only see it that I've done that in the past, but I see a lot of leaders that that's how they thought that you lead, is you blame and shame and point your finger at people.
Right. And that's going to get it done. And if I'm not doing that enough, I'm not leading.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah, even I have I was talking to a woman recently who invests in a bunch of companies, and she was telling me now that one of the biggest problems they have with CEOs now is that they have no idea how to retain their people, because things that they had done for years that worked don't work anymore with newer employees coming into the workforce. And she was saying that the CEOs that they've had to fire, right? So she's a VC. So coming in, the people that they've had to fire have mostly been around their people problems. And I
Ah,
thought that was really interesting.
yes. Did she give you any examples?
Um, she her main thing, we were at a dinner party, of course, so I think we were interrupted numerous times, but I made a point to make sure I get with her again. But the examples that she was using was that they were treating a lot of millennials and Gen Z employees as if they were, Gen Xers who want to be generally left alone, and or baby boomers who you can just tell them what to do and that's fine. And so what they were getting was just a ton of turnover in these companies, even though the strategy was good, the vision made sense, their numbers even looked pretty good, but the turnover was incredible with their. And if you look at it, millennials are a huge portion of the workforce right now, right? They're no longer the young people. They're the young leaders. They're like, they're almost middle-aged. And so it's not like you can say anymore that this is just, the young people. No. And so she was saying, times are changing and people have to change too, in terms of how we deal with people. And so all of this, emotional intelligence, that Daniel Goldman book, is like the number one social science book in the world, like most widely read. Yet we have trouble sometimes still getting CEOs to focus on it, because it's not in our comfort zones.
And the theme that I'm hearing here with you today is, I think most of us that are in leadership positions, CEOs, are Gen Xers and baby boomers. And the way that we did it isn't working anymore. And I mean, I remember the golden rule, right? Treat others the way that you want to be treated. But they're not us.
Right.
It's treat them the way they want to be treated, not the way we want to be treated. So from the instruction manual all the way down, it's like really paying attention to the nuances and the differences in the people that we manage.
Yeah. And one of the reasons I think why you're seeing so much enrollment in your leadership programs for emerging leaders or advancing leaders, and why us at our company are seeing so many companies now really wanting to focus on leadership development, is because their younger workers are requiring it of them. They want to learn. They want to be having these conversations. They are no longer work-life balance. Like, we should just forget that terminology altogether. We use it for what it, a general thing of what it means, but really we kind of mean like work and life are, who is this whole person, and how do I treat you, Mark, like I treat you at work? It's also how I would treat you if you were a friend. Like, how are you as a person doing? And that can be a really hard change for people who are used to thinking, I go to work, I do this, I go home, and then I live my life. And young people are saying, no, we saw our parents do that, and we're not going to be miserable like they were at home. So you know what? We're going to have fun at work. We're going to have fun at home, or we're going to work hard at work, and we're going to work hard at home. And that's why they'll get on at night sometimes and work, or they'll figure out tools to like chat GPT and things, and they'll use it in a way to teach us. I mean, you can learn a lot from young people if you're open to it, because they can get things done faster and more efficiently than us. And a lot of times it's just going to look really different, but they're requiring it of us. They're requiring for us to have these hard conversations where they're requiring mentoring. These are generations that I have people who regularly introduce me and want me to meet with their parents, because that's how they love their parents. They're a part of their life. Their parents were their mentors and their coaches, and that's a very different paradigm than certainly us Gen Xers, and the baby boomers. But with me, we were latchkey kids.
Exactly.
Our parents were working. We were used to problem solving and figuring out life on our own, and they really want our mentorship and leadership. And if you're not having weekly one-on-ones, they're going to go somewhere where they can find it.
But you mentioned weekly one-on-ones before, and you said I think they were 30 minutes. How would you suggest structuring a one-to-one? What is the how-tos or the best practices for one-to-ones?
Yeah, I like, we've looked at this a lot. We've tried a lot of different things. I like Mark Horseman from Manager, the Effective Manager. I like his basic format because it's really simple and people can remember it. And basically, yeah, there you go. it hasn't, you have the second edition, which is blue and fancy. Mine is the first edition. But basically, with Mark Horstman's work, he says that in the you do, and he comes from the world of engineering, so he's a little more scientific than I am, who comes from more of an arts background. But he says that first 10 minutes, if you have 30 minutes with each person, that first 10 minutes is their time. So they come in ready to talk to you about whatever they want. So it could be questions. It could be how that my cat died. It could be that how I'm having trouble with this client. It could be things are going great, whatever it is. And then the second 10 minutes is your time. So you can say, hey, I'm thinking, I woke up thinking about this client and this project that you're doing, or I'm worried about this, what's happening here. You can ask your questions. And then the third 10 minutes, in kind of a perfect world, let's say, is the time that you're talking about their career, bigger picture, the vision of the company, how they relate to it, what lights them up at work, whatever those things are in that last 10. Now, he does say that generally you won't get to that third 10 minutes every time. So a good rule of thumb that I like to say is once a month. So if once a month you're at least talking to them about the bigger picture or where they see something, that's a good rule of thumb. And then maybe it's 15-15. Maybe sometimes it's 20 minutes of them, 5 minutes of you, depending on what's going on with them. Like in your case, Mark, where you were talking about the guy whose father was ill, he may need more time to process a little bit, and you may need to talk about that a little bit. Sometimes we as business leaders get really nervous when we're in a meeting with someone and we're talking about their personal life a little too long. And we think like, oh, is this getting into like therapy? Are we not focused anymore on goals or strategy? And you just have to tell yourself, like, is it just this time, or is it because he's going through this hard, or am I just now getting into a very different role with people, and now I'm just so cushy that we're not even ever getting to the goals and objectives ever. And if that's happening, you can say, listen, I just want to make sure that we get to that. I'm giving you support and structure around your goals and objectives. So I want to allow some time for that. So, let's have another meeting, let's have lunch and talk about this. At another time, or whatever it is, right? But most of the time, people themselves are pretty aware of it. You see a couple people take advantage of it, but most of the time, people really, are used to it. I think what we see more is that people come into the meeting not prepared. So
Yeah.
you'll say, it's, hey, what's going on? And they say, everything's good.
Yeah. And then what?
And then what? And then you're like, and what most managers do is they throw out the format that I just said, and they go into their 10 minutes, which turns into their 28 minutes. And then the meeting's over. And you think you're doing a one-on-one because you've just talked at them for 28 minutes, and they are happy because they've just sat back and are thinking about, their weekend plans or whatever. And so what I'll say, and I just talked to somebody about this yesterday, what I'll say is that if you've told them, listen, we're going to try this format, and I suggest that you tell them ahead, like, again, if you tell them ahead of time, it makes it easier later. So if you say, we're going to try this format, I tell them it's in this book, The Effective Manager. So they think, you actually did some research into this. It's you're going to come in for the first 10 minutes, and that's your time. You're going to come to me with whatever you have. You can have questions from the week, you can have thoughts, you can tell me an update of how your projects are doing, whatever it is. They'll come in, let's say they have nothing, and then you go, okay, I'm prepared, I can jump in with my stuff, but this time is valuable for you. And part of the science of the format is that you get an opportunity to talk first, and you don't just have to listen to me for half an hour. So I'll go ahead this time and start and ask you questions, but next time I'd like you to be prepared to start. And if they come in again, not ready, then you can say, listen, I thought we talked about this. This is what I want. Here's the format. Give it to them. If they come in a third time, and I had someone this happened to yesterday. They come, and you know what they did? the mistake they made was the person came in and they again went in and did it for them. Well, now it's just like bad parenting, right? You're just doing everything for them. And so what I say to them is like, listen, I don't want to waste your time or mine. So why don't we reschedule this for another time when you're ready? So let me know when you're ready this week and I'll make sure that we have the time. And then believe me, they will be ready because nobody wants to do that.
Yes, yes. I know one of your tips is the power of questions. So I'm thinking if there was these long pauses, what I would do is like, so what are you struggling with this week? What's going well this week? I'd have maybe a handful of those questions at my fingertips that I could kind of prompt the conversation going. What do you
I
think?
love that. I love that too, because those questions are hard, right? Like that's not just like, give me an update, a status update on every client.
Yes.
What's interesting is, I know from Working Genius that you're a discernment genius like myself, and we love those kinds of questions where we're asking them to discern what are you struggling with the most, or where do you see opportunity, or any of these kinds of like bigger questions are generally much harder for people to answer on the spot from their boss. But what's kind of brilliant about that Jedi mind trick, Mark, that you just said, is that they're going to be prepared next time so that they don't have to be ready on the spot for those questions. But those are good.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, speaking of working genius, and along this theme that we need to really treat people the way that they want to be treated, what can you say about working genius? Because I know you're a certified working genius facilitator.
Oh, I love it so much. And I feel like I owe you so much in my life because you introduced me to it. And we both are galvanizers as well. So we like to get excited about things. We like to get other people excited. So whenever you get excited about something, my galvanizer kind of trips up in there and goes, okay, what is it going to be? And so Mark introduced me, for those of you out there, to the 6 Types of Working Genius, which is Patrick Lencioni's group's work. And I immediately took to it because as a discerner, I immediately hated it because I thought I was no way that this was going to be right for me. And then when I read it, I was like, oh my God, it's perfect. And then I was like, I love it. And I've used it in my personal life. I've used it at work tremendously. I've helped lots of other companies at this point use it too. And I find that every single time we do it, it's simple. It's 6 geniuses, right? So it's easy to remember. 2, everybody likes to be a genius. So you immediately get buy-in. It's asset based, right? It's all based on these strengths. So nobody feels like, oh, I'm only this genius. People generally read it and are like, yeah, I'm a genius. Third, I think that it's there's a lot of kind of, I feel like, humor and self-reflection and self-deprecation in kind of a fun way, and not some of these assessments I find, while I kind of like them all, but sometimes you get a mentality of like a tribe mentality or something where people are like, we're the best, and these people are terrible, or we're extroverts or we're introverts or whatever those things are. Whereas this one, I find, because you get 2, I think it dampens that a little bit. You have less of like, we're just one of these big categories. And I find that people aren't afraid of using it like, oh, let's bring somebody else into this meeting because they have this genius that we could use. Or I'm frustrated in this meeting, and I think it's because these are my working frustrations. And it's not about these people or about my company, but it's about that I'm sitting in a place where I just don't feel very valuable, or I don't feel like it brings me a lot of joy or satisfaction. So I've really found it to be incredibly helpful for my company. I'm the person, I made my husband do it. I made my friends do it. I have my kids pegged. I'm like, 100% in on this. And, Mark, even in our Vistage group, when someone's talking, I'm looking, you've written them on their name tags, their codes, and I'm like, oh, right, right, right. Or if I think I want to help them, but let me do this. They're a wanderer, so let me do this in the form of a question, maybe, or you know what I mean? Like, it kind of makes it if you're a people person, I think it makes it an interesting way to go deeper. And if you have trouble with people and you're better at numbers or you're better at strategy or whatever, I think it's a really good, easy tool that you can use to get better at something that maybe you struggle with more. So I find it is a kind of a win-win for everybody.
I mean, I love this tool. I use it every time I have a new group start or I have a team that I'm working with, like in my Vistage Inside program. And what I see is that it gives you the chance to have compassion.
Mm.
You know, you and I both have galvanizing, which means that we get excited about things and we tell people and we can get them going. Some people have galvanizing as a frustration. I remember when I ran my company, I used to be like, why can't this person just go out and make calls? I mean, this is simple. You just pick up the phone and you call. There's a script, you just do it. And they would be suffering greatly because they hated it. They didn't want to do it. They had all kinds of, I made up a story that there was something wrong with them versus having compassion that that's not their genius. In fact, that might be their frustration. This might not even be a good job for them. Maybe I could use their genius, and use them for something that they could be really genius at. So that's one of the things I love about working genius.
Yeah, and I love that because it's also compassion with yourself for
Yes.
things that you're not. I'm really not great at getting my expense reports done on time. My accounting staff wants to tear their hair out at me. I'm late every time, and I have to find tricks to get myself through it. And after doing Working Genius, I was like, oh right, this is a working frustration. And if I do too much of this in a day, I feel burnt out or I feel frustrated or I hate my job or whatever. And I have these things on my desk. You're gonna think I'm a real dork, but I have these like old fashioned sand timers. And so if I have to do something related, like here, if I have to do, expense reports or something that's really, time for me takes me forever, I distract myself during it. I can't seem to focus on it. So now I've spread it out throughout the whole day when it probably could have taken me 20 minutes. And so I have this 20-minute timer and I turn it over and I go, okay, Christine, you're going to focus for 20 minutes on this tenacity frustration, and then you get like a little treat, or you get to go for take the dog to the dog park, whatever it is that gets me through it, that I can kind of laugh at this frustration, then it's a little less
Yeah.
frustrating for
So
me.
we have more compassion for ourselves. I do the same thing. I mean, I probably spend more than 20 minutes thinking, oh, I got to do that thing. Oh, I got to do that thing. I got to do that thing. But what
I'm
was
terrible. I'm such a bad person.
and we beat ourselves up. But the other thing that was amazing about it for me was, Daphne is my assistant. Daphne, that's her genius. She loves doing it.
Yeah,
So now
it
I
is her
give her
genius.
my expense reports and she files them. And I used to always feel guilty about giving her more work, more work, more work. Now I'm giving her a gift because every time I give her one to do, it's like that makes her happy and that makes me happy to get her off. So,
Oh, what a gift that is, right? My God. I love that.
oh, imagine a workplace where we all got to be in our genius all day long and didn't have to
We
do the
try. We try, but we're not there yet. But hopefully you could get close. You could at least be in your competencies or maybe in your frustrations for maybe only an hour a day or something. I don't know.
So this has been great. I wanted to people to get to know you because you're a Vistage speaker now, and I know a lot of Vistage chairs listen to this. So if people wanted to get a hold of you, and I know you have a great podcast, so
I
anyone
do.
your podcast because you can find it on Apple Podcasts by
Yeah.
searching your name, right?
Yep, my name or stepping into your leadership. That would be great. Also, our website is tlpnyc.com. Everything is there too. And you can find everything on there. We actually have more tips on there for free. You can download some stuff. We have a difficult conversations wheel that helps you prepare for some of those conversations. We have an employee motivating your employee toolkit. Lots of things that you can just download to do yourselves, or ways that we can help you to do that with your staff, including Working Genius. So thank you, Mark.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. This has been helping leaders achieve what matters.